Do you want to play insanely beautiful chords at the piano, but you're not sure where to start? Well, most students think that pro pianists have this special gift where they can just hear these beautiful chords and play them. But the truth is that most pro pianists use a very specific system called the chord extension system to take ordinary chord progressions like this and make them sound like this. So in today's lesson, you're going to learn everything that you need to know about the chord extension system. I'm going to show you what chord extensions are, how to use them on the most common chords, plus how to apply them to almost any chord progression. So let's go ahead and dive in. So let's start with the basics. Chord extensions are specific notes that you can add to seventh chords to make them sound beautiful, rich, and colorful. As an example, you could take an ordinary C major chord and make it sound like this with chord extensions. In fact, you can use chord extensions on any chord progression to make it sound beautiful. As an example, what if you had a C major going to A minor and then D minor going to G major? Well, here's how the exact same chord progression would sound with chord extensions. Doesn't that sound so much more beautiful and interesting? Now you might be thinking that I'm just playing these random notes, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I'm actually using this chord extension system, which is a very simple four-step system, which I'm going to show you next. But before we do this, if you're enjoying the video, please hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. All right, step one to playing chord extensions are to learn the three chord extensions, which are the second, fourth, and sixth notes of the major scale. So if you take a C major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, your chord extensions are the D, the F, and the A. However, we don't call them the second, fourth, and sixth because chord extensions, by definition, are notes stacked on top of a chord. And here's what I mean. When you take a chord like a C major, you might notice that all of the notes are a third apart. This is called Tertian Harmony or tertiary harmony, which means you build chords by stacking third intervals. And this is the case for all four of your main triad types. So major chords have 2/3, minor chords have 2/3, diminished chords have 2/3, and augmented chords have 2/3. Now, if you continue stacking thirds on top of a chord, this is how you end up with your chord extensions. And here's what I mean. If you take a C major chord and you stack another third that comes from the C major scale, you end up with a B, which is the seventh note of the scale. So we call this a C major 7. Now, if we stack another third, we end up with a D, which is a ninth interval away from the C. So we call this a C major 9. And if we stack another third, we get an F, which is 11 notes away from the root. So this is called a C major 11. And finally, if we stack one more third, we have the A, which is a 13th interval from the C. So this is called a C major 13. And this is why we call them chord extensions, is because we're stacking notes on top of our original chord or extending the chord up. Now, as a quick note, if I were to stack one more third on top of the A, I'd end up with the C, which is the root of the chord. So the highest chord extension that you can have is the 13. Now, remembering the 9, 11, and 13 can sound very intimidating, and it can be very challenging for students new to this concept. So here's a little trick. If you want to play the 9, the 11, and the 13, you can think of them as the 2, 4, and 6. So if you're trying to figure out these notes, maybe on a G chord, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the 9, 11, and 13 are 2, 4, and 6. Now in just a minute, I'm going to show you how to use your chord extensions on all of the most common chords that you'll encounter. But before I show you this, there are two very important notes that you need to know about chord extensions. First, if you want to add a colorful note to a C chord like the D, you would not call this the 9, you would actually call this an add 2. And the reason for this is that when you call something a 9, it implies that the 7th is present in the chord. In other words, an add 2 just means you're adding the second note to a major chord, and a 9 means you're adding a note to a 7th chord. Second, you generally label an extended chord by the highest extension in the chord. So let's say you have a C major 7 and you want to add the 9 and the 13 to the chord. And you might play this chord like this. It's a really beautiful C chord. Well, you would call this chord a C major 13 chord, even though you have 2 chord extensions present in the chord. In this case, calling it a C major 13 chord implies the presence of the 9th extension. Now, not all chord extensions need to be present in highly extended chords like a C major 13. For example, you could play a C major 7 and just add the 13, and it would still be called a C major 13. Notice in this case that there's no 9, there's no 11, and it's still called a C major 13. And you could also omit or take out other notes, like the 5th of the chord is a very common note to remove, and this would still be called a C major 13 chord. By the way, I wanted to mention that you can download the lesson sheet music that you're seeing up here on the top left of your screen, and you can also change the key of this entire lesson with the click of one button with our smart sheet music, so I'll put a link to all of that below. All right, now that you understand what chord extensions are, the next step is to make sure you know the 5 most common chords that you'll use in chord progressions and popular styles of music. So this is a quick review of the 5 chord types, and then I'll show you which extensions you can use on each of these chords. The first chord is a C major 7 chord. This comes from the C major scale, and it is purely stacked thirds. The second chord is a C minor 7 chord. It's a minor triad on the bottom, and we're going to take the 7th note of that major scale and we're going to flat it. So it's a flat 3, flat 7 chord. The third chord you need to know is a dominant 7 chord. It's basically a C major chord on the bottom with a flat 7 on top. The fourth chord is a diminished 7th chord. For this chord, we have all minor third intervals. And you could think of this as a flat 3, flat 5, and a 6, or if you want to be technically correct, it's actually called a double flat 7. And the fifth chord that you need to know is what's called a half-diminished chord, or a minor 7 flat 5 chord. This one has the flat 3rd, the flat 5th, and the flat 7. Now the great thing is if you know how to play these 5 chord types, you'll be able to play 99% of chord progressions in the jazz, blues, gospel, funk, soul, R&B styles, and so many other styles. All right, next I'm going to show you which extensions you can use over each of these chord types, and then finally at the end we're going to put all the chords together in some sweet chord progressions, so stay tuned for that. All right, for major 7th chords, the 2 chord extensions that you can use are the 9th and the 13th. Now, a quick trick to remembering this is to go to the missing notes of the major scale, and you can play the 2nd and 6th, and they're the same notes. So how do you play the 9th and 13th chord extensions in an interesting way? Well, here are 3 common chord voicings that you can use to make these sound really beautiful. And by the way, a voicing just means the order of the notes and how you spread them out on the piano. So the first voicing has the 3rd on the top, and it sounds like this. Super beautiful C major 9. The second voicing has the 5th on the top, and it sounds like this. Super beautiful C major 13. It includes both of our chord extensions. And finally, if you want to put the root on the top, the A, here's one of my favorite voicings. Okay, this is a C major 9 because it includes all of the notes of C major 7 plus the 9. Now there are alternate versions of these chords. For example, on that last chord, you could play it like this and use the 13. Or you could do it like this. into a really big cluster chord. There are all kinds of possibilities and combinations with these chords. So have some fun with them and experiment, make up your own voicings that you like. Next, we're going to look at minor seventh chords. And the two chord extensions that generally sound really good on minor seventh chords are the 9 and the 11. And if you can't remember this, you can simply go back to the missing notes of the major scale, and it's the 2 and the 4. All right, here are three of my favorite voicings to use on minor chords. The first one has the 3rd on the top, and it sounds like this. Super beautiful, gorgeous C minor chord. And this is called a C minor 11 because it has all of the notes of C minor 7, plus it has the 9 and the 11. Okay? The second voicing has the 5th on the top, and I like to play it like this. Okay, kind of a crunchy chord. This is called a C minor 9 because it has the notes of C minor 7 plus the 9. And the third chord has the root on the top. This is a crunchy one. Check it out. Okay, this has a lot of cluster in it. This is a C minor 11 because it has all of the notes of C minor 7 plus the 9 and the 11. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this lesson, and I just wanted to mention, if you want to do a deep dive on this topic of chord extensions, and you really want to understand how to use them on all types of chords, you want some exercises to master them in all of your keys, you want to learn even more voicings for these chords, plus how to use them on the most common chord progressions so that you really build confidence with these chords, then check out our full-length course on chord extensions. I'll put a link to that below. All right, next let's look at dominant seventh chords, and the two extensions that work on dominant seventh chords are the 9 and the 13, or you can think of them as the 2 and the 6. And here are three common voicings. The first has the 3rd on the top, and it sounds like this. Super crunchy C13 chord. It's a C7 with a 9 and a 13 in it. The second voicing has the 5th on the top, and I like to play it like this. Okay, this is a C9 because it has the C7 plus the 9 in it. And finally, we're going to play a chord with the root on the top. This is one of my favorites, and it sounds like this. Okay, this is called a C13 because it has all the notes of C7 plus the 9 and the 13. All right, next we're going to look at diminished seventh chords, and the two chord extensions that work on these chords are the 9 and the 11. Here are three of my favorite voicings on these chords. The first one has the 3rd on the top, and it sounds like this. Okay, this is a C diminished 11 because it has the 11th in the chord. The next one, we're going to put the 5th on the top, or the flat 5, and it sounds like this. Okay, this is a C diminished 9. And the third one has the root on the top, and I like to play it like this. Okay, this is a C diminished 9. All right, one more chord type, and then I'm going to show you how to use these chord extensions on chord progressions. The last chord is your half-diminished chord, or your minor 7 flat 5 chord, and the two chord extensions you can use on this are the 9 and the 11. Here are three of my favorite voicings. This one has the 3rd on the top, and we call this a C minor 11 flat 5, or you could call it C half diminished 11. The second voicing has the 5th on top, or the flat 5, and we play it like this. Okay, this is called a C minor 9 flat 5, or C half diminished 9. And the third one has the root on top, and I like to play it like this. Okay, this is called a C minor 11 flat 5, or a C half diminished 11. All right, we're in the final step, number 4, and in this step, I'm going to show you how to use these chord extensions on some really cool chord progressions. So the first progression is a pop chord progression. We're going to use C major up to F major, A minor, down to G major. And here it is with extensions. Okay, basically on the C chord, I'm using a C major 9. On the F major, I'm using an F major 13. On the A minor, I'm using a beautiful A minor 9. And then on the G, I'm using a G 13. Now, what about our other chords, the diminished and half-diminished chords? Well, these are chords that you'll typically see in a minor chord progression. So let's look at a minor chord progression you'll typically see in the jazz style. We have C minor 7, down to A minor 7 flat 5, that's a 6 chord, and then a D minor 7 flat 5, it's a 2 chord, and then instead of going to a 5 chord, we're going to use a related chord called a B diminished, and this will lead us back to the first chord, the C minor 7. All right, and here it is with the chord extensions. So on the C minor, I'm using a C minor 11. I have the 9 and 11. On the A minor 7 flat 5, okay, I've got the 9 and the 11, super beautiful. And then on the D chord, okay, this one has the 9 and 11 on it, and then this one I love. Okay, this is that B diminished, but I'm using the 11 in it. Hey, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the lesson, please let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out pianowithjonny.com. We have over 1,000 step-by-step lessons for all playing levels where you'll learn your favorite songs, styles, and how to improvise at the piano. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.